Oh, hallelujah, Yahweh. I am overwhelmed at your goodness. I'm overwhelmed by your love. I'm overwhelmed by your letters. I'm overwhelmed. So much so that it just exudes from every pore in my body. And I just thank you, Abba. I thank you for loving us. I thank you, Father, for calling us out of darkness and into your marvelous light. I thank you, Abba, for teaching us your language letter by letter. I thank you, Abba, for setting the stage for what you're going to do next, which is awesome. Great and mighty are you. Hallelujah. Amen. Amen.
Hallelujah. So this is the week of Vav. Hey, look, he's the Vav, man. Sticks in your head. The Vav doesn't necessarily mean the word man, but it's the masculine suffix. And this is weird. Somehow I got some pages missing or something. Huh. Anyway. Oh, I know what I did. Okay, never mind. Okay, so anyway, about the letter Vav, but let me talk about the chart for a moment. At the very bottom, the last line over in the right-hand corner, it says Daniel 12, Mem Pei Tav Het. And then it says key, index, site, speech, begin, and it's Pei Tav Vav Resh. Well, up here, there's more English words, and down here, there's more Hebrew. The idea is that generally we start at the top. Start looking at this, and it's kind of like nobody really knows Hebrew, or they don't know this Hebrew. And so there's these English words, there's Greek words, there's English letters. This, it says Dead Sea Scroll font. There was a D.N. Friedman, professor at UC San Diego, had written a bunch of books. One of them was the Leviticus scroll from the Dead Sea, and they found numerous different shapes of letters, and that's what those are there. And then the red is the eriktology font. And just to give an explanation, some people have been watching this stuff for some period of time, years perhaps, and so this might sound redundant. But this particular series of this, talking about this chart, my perspective, I'm trying to present it like it was some kind of college class. And some people may not have watched any videos over the last 20 years. And this stuff will be pretty new. Now, I don't know if that's the case, and so sorry for the redundancy again. But the point is, what's going on here? So I'm trying to be kind of introductory, basic, elementary, but at the same time, jump right into the essence of what it's all about. Hence the concept of the college class, not just like a grammar school presentation. So let me explain the eriktology font. There's a record in the Dead Sea Scrolls, that book by D.N. Friedman, showing these various shapes of letters. And what he was doing, Mr. Friedman, is that he looked at all the different idiosyncrasies, the slight differences in the letter shapes, and said, now, why is that? What did the Sofer, the scribe, have in his mind? What was this ideal letter shape as he was writing? And as he was writing, perhaps he was tired, perhaps he was in a hurry, perhaps his pen blobbed out some ink. Nobody knows, but why do the letters look different? And he determined that there was some kind of an ideal shape the guy had in mind. But nobody knows necessarily what that is. It has to be derived from the examples. So I looked at, back in 2000, let's say 2006 to 2010, I looked at every possible example of ancient letter that I could find. And at that time, there wasn't the internet as we now know it. So I was looking in encyclopedias and various other artifacts of record, including like the Etruscan, which is from ancient Italy. And it's like, what's that got to do? Well, it came from the Phoenician basic root. And it's like, well, what's Phoenician? That's where we get the word phonics. And there's a city in Lebanon called Byblos, Byblos in English letters. And that's where the word Bible comes from. That's where the word biblio, which is the word book in Spanish, or biblioteca, which is library in Spanish, the place of books. That's where that comes from, Byblos, because it was said, and I remember many years ago hearing that the Semitic alphabet was, you might say, developed in the city of Byblos, which is Phoenicia, now Lebanon. And I've asked people from Lebanon, hey, who were the Phoenicians? It's like, yeah, just people lived here a long time ago. It's like if somebody said, hey, who are the American Indians and where'd they come from? It's like a bunch of savage natives that were running around in half naked and wild, uncivilized, and nobody knows where they came from. And they had to be cleared out because they were not fully human. That's all we know of the Native Americans, none of which is true, but that's what we were told in grade school, you might say. And so there's these things get lost, myths develop, legends, lore, lost to the past. Nobody knows, nobody cares. Stuff to make movies out of. Well, what about this Semitic language? Well, you look up Isaac Moseson wrote a book called The Origin of Speeches, and he calls the Semitic alphabet the Edenic, like the Garden of Eden, the Edenic language, back at the beginning when everything was great. And at the Tower of Babel, after the Noah's flood, things morphed and changed, and hence we have all the languages we have today. But the Bible tells us that back then, all the world spoke one language. And the reason that Elohim himself scrambled the languages was because the people wouldn't do what he said. He told them to disperse over the earth. Once Noah and his 3 sons and their wives came out of the ark, he said, hey, fill the earth. And they didn't. They stayed in one place, built a city, a big nation, and they were going to build this tower. Nimrod was the chief guy at that time. He was a warrior, mighty man. And he, some say that was actually, Gilgamesh, who was the Epic of Gilgamesh, that was about, and that the tomb of Gilgamesh, perhaps the mummy of Gilgamesh, was in Baghdad, which the U.S. military went to grab at the occasion of the siege of Baghdad in the Gulf War. That was what that was all about, according to some people's opinions. And that he was a giant. He was how he got to be a giant, but nevertheless, there's pictures of him holding a lion as if it was a kitten, carved statues. Anyway, the point is, they didn't disperse. He was trying to build this tower that would reach up into heavens, and some people say that the tower was unto the heavens means it had astrological pertinence, that it was built according to the stars and constellations. And other people say, no, it was built way up high because he, being a warrior, had built a bow and arrow, and he wanted to get up so high he could shoot an arrow in the face of whatever god was up there that was responsible for all these other things going on. But again, those are just people's opinions. But nevertheless, the people were scattered, and it's said that it's said, and wherever that's found, maybe in the book of Yashar or somewhere, Jubilees, that there was 70 languages that derived out of the one single language, and the people said, well, hey, that guy's speaking my language, so we'll hang out together. And it's just like, it was almost like Elohim appointed different people to have different language, and when you found somebody spoke your language, you went off with those people. That's who you were with. It separated them according to their languages. Hey, but that guy's my friend. I don't even know what he's saying anymore. Okay, well then, anyway, so that's what happened. And in Zephaniah 3:9, it says that Elohim is going to restore to the world a pure tongue. And so you go, well, when is that? Or what's the function of that? So that they will all serve Obed, Elohim, with a common shoulder or one consent. Or what does that mean with a common shoulder? Well, I've been on a construction crew where there's a big giant beam and you've got a dozen guys on the crew and everybody has to take that load on their shoulder and ready, go. And you pick it up and you carry it over a wall or you carry it into position so it can be placed if you don't have a crane. That's the picture of saying we will all worship Elohim with a common togetherness. And the word of that is spelled Yod Het Dalet. Now, the word spelled Aleph Het Dalet is Achad. And when Yeshua was praying in the Garden of Gethsemane in John 17, he said that he and his Father were one. That's the word Achad. It doesn't mean singular. It means singular of what? Purpose? It doesn't mean I am that one I see in the mirror. That's me. We're the one. We're Achad. It means that we're of a common purpose. But for the 12 tribes to have a commonality, that's Yod Het Dalet. The word spelled with just simply Het Dalet is the number one. And if you notice, that's just this straight line, thin singularity. You make a dot, you almost can't see it. But if you draw a line, which is a dot extended, well, okay. So I'm just saying that it means mono, uni, sharp, pointed, like a knife edge. That's the number one. It's the pronoun of I, myself. That's this. And if you think, well, graphics and language has developed into an expression of these concepts, it's very appropriate that the number one and the pronoun I is just this straight line. And the word Anoki, translated I am, first word of Exodus 20, where Elohim says, I am Yahweh your Elohim. Those are the first of the 10 commandments. Anoki Yahweh Elheka. The word Anoki means I will plummet, or I will plummet myself. Like a plumb bob is where you hold up here and you drop a weight with a string, and what you get is this vertical line. It's verticality, perpendicular to the otherwise horizon. And that idea that Elohim will use himself or project himself into this verticality, a singularity, and then identify himself. See, there's something to that, to the spelling of that word translated I am. There's also Ehyeh and Aleph Tav Yod, Aleph Vav Tav Yod, referring to myself, me, and Ani, Aleph Nun Yod. There's these different words referring to self as I am. So when somebody says, Yeshua claimed to be I am, they said, before Abraham was I. Which word did he use for I am? Oh, he used the sacred name, the Tetragrammaton, which is Yod He Vav He. That's not I am. That's basically he will cause it to exist. That's speaking the third person with a Yod prefix. But see, you don't know that, and people say stuff, and you don't know what's really going on. So I mentioned last week, talking about the letter He, that this is not a study of the dictionary meaning of words. And that being said, how does anybody know what a word really means? So you can choose your favorite dictionary. My favorite dictionary is Ernest Klein's Etymological Dictionary of the Hebrew Language for readers of English. There's a bunch of other dictionaries, but then you got to say, well, why is that a good dictionary? And the reason I talk about that dictionary, which is now out of print, there's an online version and people have made that accessible. If you go to, I think, the eriktology.net, if you go to the chat on this call, is that if you go to Eriktology 2.0 on YouTube, is because they're just putting stuff online instead of in print. But the point is, what I find is that if I'm looking for a word, you have to learn the alphabet first, so you just know where to even look. But if you're looking for a word and your eyes are scanning and seeing these other things, the information's going into your mind, and you can see the similar spellings, and what difference does it make if you add one more letter, change the letter? And it really helped my personal learning experience to use the physical paper book. And if you punch online on the computer and just write in a word and that word comes up, you miss all that other stuff before it and after it. So anyway, just for that's a personal use. But the idea that with the hey, I was saying, this is not a dictionary, meaning the letters have a value, a meaning, they represent a concept, an idea, and the idea is captured by a picture which has a definition. But that definition or that picture of the letter is, you might say, a placeholder. It's not the full essence of the letter. And yet when you spell words, they're a combination of letters. And so what I've found over the course of study is that if you look at the spelling of a word, each letter means something. It's like put into a soup where it flavors the overall taste. And the effect that one letter has on the next letter, whether it's right to it, whether it's before it or after it, whether there's another letter in between, whether the letter in between is a yod or a vav or an aleph or a tav, it makes a difference. It affects the meaning of the word, but the word meaning is composed by the letters which spell the word. Now, there are some linguistic authorities who will not recognize that. In fact, they deny it. And they'll say, I'm an idiot, or shut up, don't listen to this guy, he's a liar, he's making stuff up. And just so you know, and so you then have to decide for yourself whether this is credible information worthy of regard or not worthy of regard. And if it's not worthy of the regard, don't waste your time. Goodbye. Just go watch cartoons or something. If you want to hear what I have to say, to study this, what I'm saying is of fundamental significance. The study of the language is to see that each letter means something, and when you spell a word and you push letters next to each other, they have an effect on each other, and that effect can be determined. It's not a total mystery. It's a mystery to some, and we'll get into that as to why, looking at Daniel 12, which is the last line down here, Daniel 12, and this word spelled mem pei tav het. Well, pei tav het means that it can be open. Something can be open. Mem pei tav het, see, if you know what the mem as a prefix means, it's the occasion, the tool, the device, the fact that someone is making this thing, then the verb action is open. So mem pei tav het is the word key, which might actually be index, which is also to be able to see or to be able to comprehend what this is saying. So this whole chart is a mem pei tav het. But see, you wouldn't know why I've got this one square down here in the right-hand corner down at the bottom. I've also, in the next thing down below, got model equisetum, and at the very bottom, it says Eriktology 2010 in red, and then it says Ayin Dalet hyphen Ayin Tav in a little rectangular enclosure. That's at the extreme bottom corner. That's the foundation stone. That's the bedrock, and it comes from Daniel 12, verse 4. The line is, the whole horizontal row here is Daniel 12, where I have it lined up where like the first square, that's something about the aleph. The next one lined up has something to do with the bet. So there's this design of this whole chart, but that's the cornerstone, which I'll explain, having something to do with the vav. But the idea that the shape of these letters, what I did is in looking at all the possible shapes of letters with artistic license, poetic license, I determined using real actual letter shapes, but not necessarily ever found as an archaeological specimen, this 22 letter set with these letter shapes. But I determined what I felt to be the clearest, most elegant, which is to say simplest, nothing fancy, meaning elegant, unadorned, basic structural, and that the letter shape projected its meaning more clearly than any other letter shape I saw specimens of. So if somebody were to say, for example, draw me a picture of a bug, an insect, what kind of bug? There's all kinds of bugs. There's praying mantises, there's beetles, there's centipedes. What kind of a bug do you want? Just a bug, the quintessential bug. Well, I might say, scientifically, I know a bug has three parts to its body. There's the thorax, the abdomen, and the head, I think is what it is. So should I draw it like an ant with three parts? Or it's like, it's a bug. Draw a big round part and a head, two parts, and they've generally got 6 legs. So 3 out this side and 3 out that side. There's your basic bug shape. They might even have antennas, but not necessarily. That's kind of like the letters. What's the basic minimum, unfancy, unadorned, which is the definition of the word elegant, smooth, sleek, minimalist? That's the word elegant. What's the most elegant letter shape so that you can look at the letter shape and it projects its meaning, not necessarily definition, but what does that letter represent? What concept, what idea? Now, this is the letter Vav, and the reason why I draw that letter Vav the way it is, right there, the 6th letter, rather than the way some of these are up here. Now, the letter that, let's say, Jeff Benner uses, it starts here and it swings over and then it drops down and there's a slash mark. If you torque that a little bit, you'll see that it became the English letter F, especially in the lower case, the hook shape with a line through it. It's the same exact letter. The letter He became the letter E, the Vav became the letter F. And it says up here at the chart that it was the digamma in Greek, but it says lost number 6. The Greeks stopped using it. They had it in their ancient alphabet and then they stopped using it. And the interesting thing about that is that because they stopped using it, the next letter, which is the Zion, became the 6th letter. No, it's the 7th letter. Zion is the 7th letter. Het is the 8th letter. But when the Greeks stopped using the digamma, the 7th letter became the 6th letter because there was no 6th letter. So that you could say, well, it doesn't matter because it still lines up, but it shifted everything. So everything starts going out of whack because the 6th is now the 7th is now the 6th, the 8th is now the 7th, the 9th is now the 8th. And it's like, no, nobody knows and nobody cares. Well, but I noticed because it makes a difference. And that lended, that one thing of getting rid of the Vav, the digamma, scrambled everything that came after it. It's like somebody threw a big rock in the water and it caused some ripples. And it's like, well, so what? There's some ripples. The ripples disappear. But now there's a rock displacing volume. And it does, depending on the size of the rock, does have an effect. But it only has an effect if you care. And nobody cares. That kind of stuff happens. So anyway, trying to say, well, what's the purpose of this chart? How does this work? The top saying this is the English, and that's how it all just lines up, just so you know. And the English directly came out of Greek. The letter A is virtually the same. The letter B lining up with beta, alpha and beta, virtually the same. Delta, D, well, the U.S. military, as far as I know, have something they call the Delta Force. What's that? Oh, those extra sneaky guys that invade first, sneak in and do a preliminary attack or stage something, because Dalet's a door. The Greek letter delta means change. Triangle symbol means change if you put it in a mathematical equation. Just something changes. Well, what changes with a door? I'm inside, there's the door, I can go outside. If you're talking religion and politics in an otherwise civil conversation at somebody's house and they show you the door, that means stop talking about it or you're out of here. It's a change. Just see, these things are embedded within our culture. hay, the pattern that I use for the hay, some people show a guy going, hey, with his hands up. Well, that's the legitimate shape. But this particular shape I'd noticed was used on maps, specifically maps showing airplanes where to fly and where the typical wind goes. And so that letter shape is put on the map so that they know that, okay, this is the wind, the jet stream goes this way. So that's like the ruach. That's the spirit, that's the wind, that's the breath, and this is where it is. So it's the placement of the typical or the standardized, the placed, that's Ayin Mem Dalet, put in position, that's Zadi Bet, station placed right here. See, all these are synonym words, which is why I'm mentioning them. This is where the wind blows because of the geography. That letter was used there. So that's the reason. And it became the letter E, and that looks like the opposite of the English letter E, which is why I use that shape. But the other shapes are perfectly legitimate. But just so you know, the Vav, there's a vertical and then this cup. I chose that shape for two reasons. One, that we'll get into in Daniel 12, it might be verse 6 or something, but Daniel was saying that I looked and I saw one on this side of the river and that side of the river, that's the Gimel. And I said to the one above the waters of the river, that's the Dalet, the one above, hey, there's the hey, how long till the end of these wonders? And then that one, referring to the guy in the Dalet position, and I'll explain that in a few minutes, held up his right hand and his left hand. Now that's a man or a human type figure standing. So there's the vertical with his hand raised like this, like a goblet. Hey, that's like the word Joseph means goblet. Joseph was the guy known as Zaphnath Paneach, the Egyptian who was the diviner of mysteries, right? He got sold by his brothers into slavery and he ended up becoming, the term is vizier, Vizier, which is also basically like a prime minister of Egypt, second only to the Pharaoh, but the Pharaoh let him do all the stuff because he was a real smart guy and Pharaoh had nothing but prosperity while Joseph was in that position. But anyway, that's like the name Joseph, goblet, to accumulate. And for some reason, right there in Daniel 12, it says that Daniel, seeing and calling out to or talking to this one, stood there with his hands raised like this. And then that guy with his hands raised swore by him who lives forever. It doesn't really say that. In Stone's Tanakh, it says he swore by the life source of the world. And it doesn't necessarily say that either. Why? Because that's the definitions of the words, and that's not necessarily what it says. The only way to know what it says, which we will do in a few minutes here, is look at the spelling of the words and say, what does it really say? And the only reason to know what it really says is to go back and plug in, how do you understand a word? By the spelling of the word. So see, I'm trying to establish this is the sixth week, besides the introduction, of talking about this chart. And I'm trying to say Daniel 12 is at the bottom. And you might say, well, we start at the top, and so now we're talking about the bottom. And it's like the foundation of this entire chart is Daniel 12. Just a little bit of story. I didn't speak Hebrew. Couldn't even tell you what the letters of the alphabet were. Somebody gave me a Tanakh. I happened to open it up. I didn't know how to read any of the modern letters. And I think, as I recall, I must have just opened up and there's Daniel 12. And this one word grabbed my eye. Boom, my eyes fell on this one word. It was down here in the bottom in the rectangle spelled Ayin Dalet hyphen Ayin Tav. And it's like, I figured out that it meant until the time. And it's like, I remembered thinking, how's anybody supposed to know when that time is? And the thought just dropped into my head. What if, or perhaps, if you knew what the meaning of the spelling of that word was, it'll tell you what time that is. And I could say, well, those weren't my thoughts. Well, the thoughts were in my head. And it's like, did some angel stick the thought in my head? I don't know. It was just, there's the thought. You see the spelling of a word and you say, well, it means until the time. And how's everybody supposed to know when that time is? It's a complete mystery, but perhaps If you look at the spelling of the word, it'll tell you when that time is. And I thought, what does that even mean? But then I started looking, and here we are, 20 years later. That was in right about this time of year, right after Sukkot. You might say it was in the autumn of 2004. No, actually, it was later on. It was in 2005. It was in this probably near the spring of 2005. Anyway, the point is, just to give you a reference, 20 years ago. It's Sukkot of 2004. I was speaking at there was a meeting of Sukkot down in the Rogue River in southern Oregon, and Nathan Lawrence actually provided me the occasion of presenting the Mishkan pattern. Happened to be the day of my 50th birthday. Happened to be right there in the middle of Sukkot. And that was the first presentation of any of these matters, just as a timestamp. But the point is, I'll explain Daniel 12 in a little bit here. But the idea that all of this is because of Daniel 12, that's at the foundation. And what this is that the letter shapes speak. They mean something. But Daniel was told, Daniel, back in chapter 9, has this archangel Gabriel met up with him. Gabor is the word for hero or champion or mighty man, valiant. El is short for Elohim or Allah, which is deity. So this is like the champion warrior hero of El. Gabriel. Michael is also the one who strikes and one who has power and capacity. So you could say, well, Michael and Gabriel are these two names of warriors. They're because the names mean, big tough guy, you might say. And Daniel was talking with Gabriel, and Gabriel told him a few things. And then all of a sudden, you're here in chapter 12, and Gabriel's talking to Daniel. And in verse 4, he says, Daniel, hide the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Now, there's another line which I remember hearing, because I went to Christian school ever since I was in 4th grade as a kid. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. And it's like, well, that's from Daniel 12, verse 4, verse 5. And it comes right after Daniel, hide the words and seal the book. So I've asked numerous people over these years, saying, hey, have you ever heard, have you ever thought, have you ever heard it talked about? Let me think about this for a moment. Daniel, you're commissioned from on high via the message by the angel Gabriel, hide the words and seal the book. Not forever, just until the time of the end. Now, I've heard my whole life, these are the last days, these are the end times, and now more than ever, and it's like the world was supposed to end back in 1988. That's what people were saying back then. But here we are, 2025, and well, if Daniel was told to hide the words and seal the book until the time of the end, then by legal right, if this is the time of the end, those words, that book, should be unhidden, unveiled. So I've asked people, does anybody know or ever hear about those words? Are the words hidden and sealed? Which book did Daniel hide, and where is it if we should now be allowed to have access to it? Most people have told me they've never heard. They've heard, many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. And look, we've got cars and airplanes and things, motorcycles, and so that's a novelty. And we got computers and knowledge, spaceship. We got knowledge that has increased. So this must be the end times. That must be the witness, the evidence of when the end times are. Okay, well, let's suppose it is, no argument. If this is the end times, what book? And so some people say the book of Revelation. It's like, listen, John wrote the book of Revelation when he was sitting in prison on the Isle of Patmos in about 90 AD. Well, that's 600 years after Daniel. Daniel was approximately 500 BC. So no, the book of Revelation is not what Daniel hid. Well, maybe Daniel wrote something that would unlock. Yeah, but that's not what Daniel was told to do. Daniel was told to hide the words and seal the book. Two very specific words. One is spelled Samech Tav Mem, and the other one is Het Tav Mem. Now, if you look at Samech Tav Mem in Klein's dictionary, it means to make anonymous, general, unclear, not specific, like nobody knows. Could be whatever. And you're supposed to do that to the words. In the book, the Sefer, the scroll, Samech Peresh, which also can mean Sefer, like we've talked about, Abraham was told to count the stars. Only the word isn't count. The word was Sefer. Abraham was told to Sefer the stars, which can mean count. But when I was a child, I remember getting these little books. They were a bunch of dots with numbers on them, and you were supposed to connect the dots that with the next number. It taught you how to count and taught you how to recognize things. And then as you drew these pictures, it would form another picture. That's exactly what the word Sefer means. It means count, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it also means to draw an imaginary line between dots. And when the Almighty in Exodus 3, talking to Moshe at the burning bush, when he says, who shall I say sent me? He said, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. And if you think about the word Ehyeh, Aleph He Yod He, it's the to exist, which is like a dot. The word Asher is a line. Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh is dot, line, dot. That's just what the words mean. If you were to take the meanings of the words and put them into pictographic essence form, it's dot, line, dot. So I've never heard anybody else say that. I'm just telling you, people can argue it's translated, I am that I am, or I will be whatever I will be. Don't try to put me in a box. I'll be whatever I'm being. Anyway, just saying there's different ways to see things. So if Abraham was told to sefer the stars, that's like doing imaginary lines between the stars. And hey, guess what? Designing constellations. The word sefer also means to narrate a story. It's a barber who gives shape to hair. So you take something, say wild, and you make it look like something. You look at something untamed or wild, meaning it could be anything, and you make it something. That's sefer. So when Daniel was told to seal the sefer, to seal something is Het Tav Mem. Het is the letter shaped like a enclosure, the 8th letter, like a fenced compound, a prison, a castle, or something that's set apart, like putting a lid on a jar that you can't get the top off unless you go get a wrench or do something to it. It can't come off. Daniel was told to seal the Sefer so that it was of ambiguous opinion, the meaning of the words, until the time, that's Ayin Tav, down in that rectangle, until the time of Kuf Zadi. What's Kuf Zadi mean? It means end, it means destruction, it means ruin. So you could say that Daniel was told, hide the words and seal the book until the time of the destruction of everything. It's not what it says. It says until the time of Ayin Tav Kuf Zadi. So you could look at a whole bunch of different translations or dictionaries and try to find out, what does this phrase mean? Ayin Dalet, hyphen, Ayin Tav, and then the word spelled Kuf Zadi. Now, if you look down here at the letter Kuf, which is our letter Q, overview, and what's Zadi? Proof? Overview and proof, what the heck is that supposed to mean? It's translated end, destruction, ruin. If you look at the word spelled Yod Kuf Zadi, well, what's the letter Yod? Here it says existence or reality, but Yod Kuf Zadi means wake up. Wake up, the existence or the reality of the overview of proof. Yeah, but how's that the end? Now, I could look at this, Yod means that, but Yod means all this stuff. Or what this chart is saying is this is the Yod perspective of the meaning of an Aleph, the meaning of a Bet, the meaning of a Gimel, the meaning of a Dalet, the meaning of a Hey, the meaning of the Vav. From the Yod perspective is the man who would do something. What does that mean? The Yod perspective of a Vav. This is the Aleph perspective of a Vav, connection. The Bet perspective of a Vav, nail, hook, tent peg. The Gimel perspective of a Vav is secures or bonded. The Dalit perspective of a vav is the word and, which is to connect something or compare. The He perspective of a vav means his, or it's a bridge. The vav, simple function, perspective of a vav is binds or blends. Blends. Just to say that this whole top section works that way. Could elaborate that later. But what I'm saying is that what's that got to do with a vav? Well, if I'm going to be talking about the chart, maybe instead of talking about the vav, I should just talk about the chart. But see, here's the point, especially with the first 7 letters, this is number 6, is that what these letters mean and why they're placed right next to each other sets up how to regard the alphabet. And if the alphabet is actually, here's another mysterious riddle. Go to John 1:1, the Gospel of John. Now, the Jews primarily, from my understanding, do not have any regard of the Gospel of John. Maybe they've never read it. I know of some who have said they've never looked at the Gospel of John. I know some Christians who've never read the Gospel of John. It doesn't matter. It's just a book. But the beginning of the Gospel of John that says, in the beginning was the Word. What word? Nobody knows what word. Maybe it's that word. Daniel was told to hide the word, make ambiguous, general, anonymous, of no particular understanding, somic, tav, mem, the word, the debar, debarim, the plural words. How do you do that? And so when I ask people, has anybody ever heard of a sermon or any teaching on this phrase in Daniel 4? It's no, they haven't. And somebody said, well, maybe there's like a Dead Sea Scroll. Maybe there's a cave somewhere over in the Middle East. Maybe it's in Baghdad or wherever Daniel was held in Babylon. And they'll open up a cave and find a scroll. And hey, look at it. It's all sealed up in a jar with wax top or something and opened up. And Daniel might have put that in there. And it's like, well, how'd you hide the words? By sealing the scroll and throw it in a cave and nobody will find it until someday in the future. But it hasn't happened yet. Maybe. Like the emerald tablets. Maybe Daniel wrote those type of a thing. Nobody knows what they mean. I don't think that's what happened. What I think would happen, based on the spelling of the words, see, the word spelled tav mem means perfect. That means just what it's supposed to be. Nobody's messed with it. Somic is an engineered structure. It looks like a tree, looks like a backbone, a skeleton, backbone with ribs. I got here that it means paradigm. So there's a basic column row engineered structure like a trellis, like a tree mast with yard arms of a sailing ship, something that takes load and can withstand the pressures of the forces against it. That's what a skeleton is. That's what a trellis holding up a plant is. That's what a tree structure is. Daniel was supposed to do something to that. Somic, the Tav Mem, the structure of the perfectly appropriate was supposed to be turned into so vague and general that nobody would know what the real one was. Well, the orthography of a letter, the shape of a letter, is kind of like the skeletal essence of the letter. So for Daniel to take the Paleo-Hebrew and turn it into a different shape, like right here in the middle, what's called the modern Chaldean flame letters, would accomplish that task. And so Daniel was known as the chief Chaldean. The Chaldeans were the wise men from the empire of Babylon. Daniel was the chief one. He was gifted from on high with previous events. And here at chapter 12 is the last chapter of the book. And it ends with him, Daniel, go to your end and rest, and you'll rise to your portion at the end of days. So this is near the end of Daniel's life. But why are these called Chaldean flame letters? Did Daniel invent this letter shape? Now you ask some Jews and they'll say, no. They'll say this letter shape, black and white, are the ones that Elohim wrote with his finger on the tables of stone, Mount Sinai. But they've never been found. They don't know that. And there's no record of any of this shape of letter in archaeological findings anytime before 500 BC. It was all after. As a matter of fact, Ezra a contemporary of Daniel, maybe a little bit later. He was the scribe who came from Persia, took over Babylon. So Cyrus, the emperor of the Persians, equipped Ezra with Nehemiah to take the Israelites, the Jews who wanted to go back to Jerusalem. He equipped them, he funded them, he gave them military guard, and they took all their stuff and went to Jerusalem. And Ezra brought with him scrolls of the Torah written in modern Hebrew. Well, how did it come that it was written in modern Hebrew? Well, he was rooting around in the museum, and he got one because the Babylonian under Nebuchadnezzar had looted it, 70 years before. Well, that's what they say, but nobody knows. I think what happened is that Daniel changed the letter shape from the Paleo to the modern Chaldean and handed it to Ezra. And Ezra took that back, and it's forever been different. And so the Elohim did not write with his finger the modern letters. That's my theory. He would have written in the Paleo. And so when you watch Charlton Heston, the movie of the Exodus, playing Moses, he's holding tables of stone written in Paleo-Hebrew, some form of this font. Because the other people know that these letters were not from ancient days. The Paleo was of ancient days, from before 500 BC. Well, what else happened about 500 BC? Pythagoras, Aristotle, Socrates, Plato. The Greek culture really started taking off. And after the Greek came the Roman. But the Greek ancient alphabet is the exact Paleo-Hebrew mirror image. It started off being read right to left, and then for some reason it flipped, and they started reading it left to right, which became the Latin, which became the English and the French and Spanish and so forth, which is just basically the Phoenician alphabet, which is the exact same thing as the ancient Hebrew. Well, why is that? Well, if Moshe was told in Exodus, 7 chapters before Elohim wrote with his finger on the tables of stone, 7 chapters before, Moshe was told, write all the words of Elohim. Well, if the Paleo-Hebrew didn't exist, then Moshe would have had to write with Egyptian hieroglyphics, or perhaps cuneiform from Sumer, Gilgamesh's empire. But you can't write the words of Elohim unless it's in Hebrew, because every letter means something. So Moshe would have had to been writing in Hebrew. Well, Book of Jasher, or some people say that Enoch had stuff written. And so they had writing before the flood. And they gave it to Noah and his sons. Shem had it. And so they gave it to Abraham. And yeah, but nobody knows that either. That's all theory. So whether or not anybody had the Paleo-Hebrew written before the flood, nobody knows. It's all just myth and legend. But at least I can zero in and say Moshe right there was told, write all the words of Elohim. Somehow he had to have these letters. Well, how did he know that these were the letters of Elohim? We've talked about this word, hey, Samach Nun, hey. It literally translates as the bush. At the burning bush in Exodus 3, Moshe had a word speaking, a voice speaking through him and telling him what was the communication? Well, telling him he was to go back to Egypt and get his people out of the land of their oppression. Okay, well, that's the narrative story. What else is it saying? Well, the word the bush is hey, that's the prefix letter that means the, Samach Nun, hey. Hey is a suffix, is the feminine suffix. It's an expression. What's Samach and Nun? Well, Samach is the engineered structure, and Nun is some kind of life, some kind of spark, some kind of vitality. So I can see that Samach Nun means the meaning of the shape of the letter. Now, no historian's telling you that. I'm just saying I can see that hey, Samach Nun, hey means that Elohim perhaps at the burning bush gave the incoming information, the engineered structure, the orthography of the shape of the letter expresses the meaning as intended coming in that you're supposed to now write so that everybody else can see what you're saying. Hey, Samach Nun, hey, simply translated the bush, can be the whole riddle of where did Moshe get the understanding of this ancient language? Now, that can be an argumentative statement, and I'm sure people can run with it, but it's a possibility. Right there at the burning bush. And a few chapters later, Moshe then wrote everything down. Now, they might have had the phonetics, they might have been speaking Hebrew. Did they have the writing of Hebrew? Nobody knows. That was about 1600 BC, just so you know. At least 1200, and some people have wondered, well, when is that really? And there's a 400-year discrepancy in the chronological reckoning, and about 1600 BC. And the only oldest artifacts have ever been dated back to about 1200 BC, which is just before the time of David, Samuel, and before, and days of Joshua, or, I mean, it gets murky back in there. But anyway, just so you know that nobody's ever found any Semitic alphabet written on anything. But then all of a sudden they start finding it, but it was before 1000 BC in Byblos. So that was just the fact that the Byblos Phoenician connection is all wrong. It was just myth. It was not developed there. Well, here's the point. If Moshe was told to write all the words of Elohim, and if Daniel in chapter 12 was told to hide the words and seal the Sefer so that it can't be interpreted, why would Elohim hide the truth, his own words from his own people? That's crazy. And then hold him responsible. You didn't do what I said, so you're going to burn in hell. Or you didn't do what I said, so I'm going to let your enemies tear you apart. Well, what did you say? I'm not going to tell you what I said. It's like, oh, come on. This is like stupid little kids fighting amongst each other. Why would Yahweh do that? I believe the answer to that is written in Daniel 12, though you wouldn't know it if you read it in the modern English. You have to have some sort of bridge, some sort of connection, some sort of vav that'll take you hearing what Yahweh said and making the connection to be able to do something with it. So going back to the meaning of the first 4 or 5 letters, see, this is why everything I was talking about the last few weeks ties into this. If you start off and say, well, what's the alphabet mean? Why are we here? Why does the world even exist? It answers that question. It addresses that matter. Aleph, if Aleph is the consciousness of self, I am, I will, Aleph is a prefix letter in front of a verb, means either I am or I will. That's what it means, as in Ehyeh, I am that I am, or I will be what I will be. So it's translated both ways. It can mean either one. But so if Aleph is this preliminary consciousness, speaking identity and intent, everything that follows the Aleph is the communication. Well, what follows the Aleph? 21 other letters. So I can say the format of the alphabet is designed like any other word, and it starts with Aleph saying I am or I will, and what he's saying is the next 21 letters. It's a long word, but that's what he's saying. Like any word. This word just happens to be spelled with these 22 letters of the alphabet in this order, but it's not like it's like spelling the word cat, C-A-T. There's a string of letters that would know means something. Same idea. That's the way the alphabet works. Well, if you start off with Aleph, I am, I will, that's this consciousness, that's this identity of the one who's speaking, but there's no substance. Bet is house. The word bet means house, but if you look closer into it, bet is also body, it's noun, it's something of an object of substance. Up here it says basic object. If you look at this way, there's in the black up here, there's another meaning of the words. Aleph says omnipotent, eternal, other side of creation event, and bet is the project outside of self. So if self is the Aleph, bet is something that Aleph does. So there's this whole understanding of how these letters relate to each other, which is the meaning of why does the universe exist and why are we here and who am I? So if Aleph is the omnipotent, eternal identity of the creator that can't be looked at as if he's here and I'm here because he's everything, all things, there's no outside of self, but he makes bet, which is some project outside of himself. So I'm Aleph, that's his bet. Bet is other. How did he do that? Why would he do that? Well, somehow he did that, and that's another explanation, gets into some philosophical perspective. But the point is, if we take this so that we can progress as just kind of a given, okay, here's Aleph is self, bet is the project outside of self. The creator created the universe. So the universe is the body, the house, the material composition of matter, which is the betness. What's Gimel? Well, if Gimel is camel, or if Gimel is some kind of verb or a mobility, but as I was saying that, well, but Gimel also is this connection, a tether between Aleph and Bet, which is to say the line between the two dots. So if I'm here and I have let's say if I have a pet dog, well, the dog's free to run wherever he wants. But if I have him on a leash, he's got to stay right here. It's like, well, where's he going to go? There's a universe. Yeah, let him run through the universe. Let him build a jet plane and fly to the other side of the universe. I don't care. I mean, here, have your own freedom. But if I said, no, stick around, well, that my desire is now this tether. And so what I've noticed in just looking at the alphabet, not reading in other books, but just in observing the alphabet, pondering the letters, and seeing how words are spelled, came to the determination that Aleph is a self, Bet is an other, and Gimel is the dynamic of the relationship between the one and the other. It's the leash, it's the tether, it's the bond. Well, Vav is a connection. So there's a very close similarity between Vav and Gimel. In fact, if I stand here like this, like the shape of the Vav, well, it's like shaped like a goblet. But I can also say, well, this hand could be the bank of a land, and this the bank of another land, and this a gully that has a river running through it. Like he saw this one above the waters of the river. There's a, and the Vav is what connects this to that. Like a Gimel. Like a bridge. Like a road between two cities. Like the relationship between Aleph and Bet can be described as the Vav, and also the concept of the Gimel. Well, what we were saying about the Dalet was that the Dalet is a choice, a door, the freedom to decide. So going back to the very beginning and saying, well, why does the universe exist if the Almighty Creator, who was a Chad, singularity, he could do anything he wanted to do. He could have anything he wanted to have. Just make it, and you're it. There is no other. You're the it of everything, the all. So he created a place where he was not. He created an other who was not necessarily connected to him, but could be. So he gave the other freedom of choice. And if we say that other is Adam, man, we could say, well, why is Adam spelled Aleph Dalet Mem? Aleph Dalet is the verb or the word that means vapor. Dalet Mem is the word that means blood. So you could say, well, vapor, that's kind of like breath, moist air. So you could say Adam's life essence is that he's of breath and blood. That's what gives him his life. But Adam is an individual with a body who has a particular, unique to himself consciousness. He's a self in a body. He's an Aleph in a Bet, and he's an Adam. Well, so are the animals. Yeah, but Adam is made in the similarity and likeness of Elohim. So he's distinctively different than all the other animals. There's something about Adam, but if the thing about Adam is that he has the choice, the option to be tethered to Aleph, so the relationship dynamic between Elohim and Adam, between Aleph and Bet in that case, was the Gimel of having a free choice, Dalet. Hey, don't eat of the forbidden fruit. You can do anything you want, except there's one matter: do not eat. So Yahweh had to give him the occasion of option to disconnect, disobey, disregard. That's the freedom of choice. If there's no freedom of choice, it's not freedom of choice. So he put the tree in the garden and said, of all the things, this is the thing. And the word fig literally means the pretext for or an excuse, or the pretext for a confrontation, a conflict. So out of all the things that may have been a conflict, Elohim picked one matter. I'm going to tell you not to do something, and I'm going to allow you to be provoked to do it. And then your choice, Adam, is to listen to my voice and not do what I told you not to do, or you're going to do what you choose to do, which is not listen to my voice. That is the conflict. Well, you might say, well, that's the basic conflict for the rest of everybody's life on the face of the earth. connect to Elohim by doing what he said or not. Don't do what he said. Do whatever you want. And then, well, why would you want to? Well, there's a few different reasons. You could just rebel for the sake of rebellion, or I don't believe that what he said is good enough. I'm going to do, or I just, like Frank Sinatra saying, I did it my way. I just want to do it my way. I just want to be independent, entrepreneurial, proactive, and I'm going to figure something out and do it my way. Well, okay, go ahead, whatever. Is that bad? Is that wrong? Is that, I mean, you know, you can sing a song and make $1 million out of it. It's like, well, it's just, what did Yahweh say? And what do you choose to do? That's the basic matter of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And you can say, well, what was that tree? Was it an apple? Was it a, doesn't matter what it was. It was Yahweh said or not. Now, the fact that it does matter that it's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that's a different thing. But what is the knowledge of good and evil? Well, fundamentally, good is Tov, Tetvav Bet, or Tzedakah, which according to 1 John chapter 3 is righteousness is doing what Yahweh said. Evil then, or wickedness, or sin, or corruption is either not doing what Yahweh said or doing the opposite of what Yahweh said, doing something else other than what he said, doing what he said not to do. So it goes back to, again, the fundamental basic situation we have on the face of the earth is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have a freedom of choice, and he's going to, hey, tell you, give you the information, do this, and you choose not to do this. That's the whole setup. But what if you choose to do it? Well, that's Vav. That's the connection. So the connection is to do what he said, with the hey incoming advice to Dalet, make your choice. And then the letter Zion, the number 7, well, it's drawn like the shape of an axe or a hatchet, or it's a weapon, and it can mean cut off, disconnect. So if Vav is a bridge of connection, Zion is disconnection. So Vav and Zion work together, connect or disconnect. Now, there's other ways to see them, which we'll talk about next week. But the point is, hey, here's some information. You can either connect or disconnect. Adam, that's your Dalet. That's your choice, which is the gimmeling between Aleph and Bet. You're the Bet, Mr. Adam, and Elohim, the creator, is the Aleph, and you get to choose to either Vav or Zion. There, that's the first 7 letters, and there's like 7 days in a package. That's the package. That's why are you here? Now, I can also say, hey is the feminine suffix, and Vav is the masculine suffix. There's another connect or disconnect. There's the package. Hey is the prefix the. Vav is the prefix letter that means and. Hey is number 5. And the word chumash, ket mem shin, is the number 5 in Hebrew. And it means, chumash as a word means armed and equipped. What do you do with that? It's another matter, just for the sake of information. The numbers, the Vav is the 6th letter. The number 6 as a word is shin, shish. And the word shish is either the word white or it means to rejoice. So somehow 5 and 6 is you can see, is feminine and masculine. And it means armed and equipped and rejoice. Well, I could say you could rejoice and not have any weapons, but man, if you've got the weapons, or if you've got the gear, you've got the contractor tools, a full truck with all good working tools, and say, yeah, I'm ready to go. Or you got your camping gear on, or you're a military group that's been equipped with everything you need, and you're going out into your foray. Well, I'm just saying that's 5, 6. That's Hey Vav. Now, the other interesting thing, that's a secret code, when Pilate had taken Yahusha, whipped him there was bits of pottery and metal, and when those Roman soldiers hit you with that type of whip, they say it would, like a fish hook, sink into your flesh, and then they rip it back and just rip your skin apart. Pretty horrible. That's what they did to Yahusha. And then he stuck the crown of thorns, and then he presented him to the people with this Roman purple robe and said, Ecce homo. That was Latin, and it means behold the man. Well, that's English. Behold the man. In Hebrew, it might be hine ha-ish. Aleph Yod Shin is man. It's also Gabor is man and Anash, but hine, hey nun, hey is behold. Well, that's like the letter hey, putting something on display. Vav is the masculine suffix, or the letter that is man. The word Zion hey means this. Zion Aleph Tav also means this. So for him to say, behold this man is kind of like, hey, Zion Vav, or hey Vav Zion. Behold man this. Look, I'm putting this man on display. So I could go, wait a second. Why would Pilate say that? Well, because there was a reason in blah. No. When I say why would Pilate say that, is because I could look back at this letter sequence and say, Bet Gimel Dalet, the three letters in sequence order, mean to be cloaked and in disguise. Camouflage, kind of like on a secret mission. And Bet means, if Bet's the universe and Aleph is referring to Elohim on the other side of creation, Gimel is this verb, this voyager, an ambassador, one coming from Elohim's realm into the universe. Hey, remember in John chapter 3 where Nicodemus, Nicodemon, the other way to say his name, he said, Yahusha, we've been watching you, and we know you come from Elohim because nobody can do the things you do unless Elohim is with him. See, we don't even know what next he said because Yahusha grabbed the conversation and he ran with it. And John 3:16, talking about being born again. You see, Nicodemus never got a chance to tell Yahusha why he wanted to talk to him that evening. Now we can think, well, Yahusha knew and he grabbed the conversation and gave it back to him. Maybe that's what he was talking to him about, but we don't know that. All we know is Nicodemus said, we've been watching you and we know you came from heaven to earth. You're some kind of voyager. You're a Gimeler who came from Aleph into our Bet. But you're in disguise. See, the word Bet Gimel Dalet means in disguise. Cloaked, clothed. Hey, behold this man. So he came incognito, Bet Gimel Dalet, and then Pilate says, look at this man. And right there, you've got the identity of Elohim's consciousness, Aleph. And when he says he's echad with his father, I only do what I see my father doing. I only say what I see my father saying. Say what it is. And I'm not here in my own regard. I'm here as the emissary. I'm here as the Bet version of the Aleph. You should observe the Aleph. You should listen to the Aleph. You should worship the Aleph. I'm the Betness of the Aleph. So I take that as saying he didn't say he was the Aleph. He said he came from his father's capacity. What does that mean? You see, for me to then argue, is Jesus God? It's like, that's not what he said. He said, my Elohim, your Elohim, my father, your father. He put himself in our capacity, referencing his father as the great Aleph. He put himself into the Betness, looking at Aleph as the other. That's a big deal. And where's my proof of that doctrine? In the Aleph Bet. You see, here's the difference. If you take, let's just say, Christian doctrine, there's been 2,000 years of various permutations of Christian doctrine. If you take the doctrine first and say, this is what we believe, Jesus is God. Okay, now, what did he mean by saying, I and my Father are one? What did he mean in the Garden of Gethsemane, John 17, where he says, hey, Dad, it's me, you. What? Yeah, we're one. And it's like, what? That was a cartoon somebody wrote. Hey, Dad, it's me, you. Anyway, I'm not making fun of it. What I'm saying is it's rather perplexing. And the whole idea that we can sit here and look at the Aleph Bet. Hey, wait a minute, Carla, are we still on?
Carla? We are still on. And
okay, all of a sudden my computer's looking weird. Okay, sorry. The whole idea that we can look at the alphabet and say, that's the basis of what to believe. Look at the Aleph Bet and spin your doctrine out of it. That changes everything. And I'll show you where it changes everything in just a couple minutes. Here's the point. The Vav man, V-A-V. Some people I also write UAW because some people say it wasn't pronounced as a V. So it's like wow, UAW, the wow factor, the Vav man. Last week I was talking about like kind of this love poem and almost like, oh, I could imagine the fantasy of what it's going to be like when we're together and all the songs are about you. And it's like, was that me projecting something? That's Yahuwah projecting something. What I was trying to say last week, putting it into anthropomorphized human terms, like Yeshua being anthropomorphized version of Yahweh, is that he has some big ideas of what it's going to be like. What's what going to be like when his people finally do what he said? Well, like Adam in the garden before he ate of the forbidden fruit. Well, Yahweh kicked him out of the garden and said, that's it. I'm done with that plan. That idea of being in the garden and everything being wonderful, how long did it last? I heard one person say once, well, just see, Adam and Eve were made on the sixth day and Yahweh was resting on the seventh. So maybe that's the day they ate of the forbidden fruit. The first day. There's this word shin bet resh that means broken, crumbled, like you break up corn and you put it in the grits to feed the chicken. So you break, you crush, you crumble, but it also means to break a dream. It also means to solve the interpretation of a secret code, something broken. Well, if Daniel was told to hide the words and seal the sefer, to break that apart is also shin bet resh. Just so you know, we'll get into that. For Yahweh to say, oh, I have this big idea, so I'm going to build the universe, and I'm going to put Adam, and I'm going to make Adam and Hua, and they're going to live in this garden, and everything's going to be great, and then they blow it, and he has to kick him out, and then there's death and all this problems, and then he says to Abraham, hey, I'm going to make a whole empire out of you, a family, a nation, and then that all goes messed up with the 12 tribes and Rehoboam and Solomon going after all the 1,000 women's various gods. And it's like, and Yeshua says, hey, I'm here to restore everything. And they kill him. And then he flies away and says, I'll be back. And then within just a few decades, there's no record of anything being whatever Yahweh has ever wanted, ever. We can't look at the last 2,000 years and says, oh, that's Israel restored. So every time Yahuwah talks about, hey, I've got this big idea. I'm going to be your Elohim and you're going to be my people. And even though I had turned against you with anger because you really ticked me off, Israel, I was only a little ticked off. And I let your enemies tear you apart. And yeah, they had their way with you. But when you guys come back and I take you back into my favor, then I'm really going to be pouring out my wrath on your enemies who took advantage of the fact I was kind of ticked off, although I was really ticked off. So it's everything. What? Everything's this measure of how mad is he? How disturbed? And what is he? What did he do? And what's the turnaround? In 50 years of me going to church, I never heard this. In all the books I've ever read, I've never heard this. But what I see written is that Yahweh has this idea, this fantasy relationship where he's our Elohim and we're his people, we're walking in his ways, we're doing his stuff, and we're doing righteousness. And like I was saying, like somebody asked about, hey, well, what's the koof? What do we do after we Zadi, resurrect, come back? How do you koof? You abide. The dude abides, like the Big Lebowski. The dude, Dodie is beloved. Just abide. Well, how do you do that? Hey, he told us, do what I said. Live your life on the face of the earth like in the garden and just do what I said. That's righteousness. Don't do the lying, killing, stealing that your forefathers were prone to do and rebelling against me and not believing me and not trusting me. Don't do that stuff. Just abide. And you read the beginning, the first 15 verses of Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, and it tells you what a simple life that works looks like if you just abide. Just do what he said. It's like, yeah, but where's the chase? Where's the action? Where's the thrill? It's like nature will work. Your animals will have baby animals and your crops will grow and you guys will eat and have fun living. Yeah, is that all? It's like, yeah, pretty much. Well, see, maybe that's not good enough for some people, but that's what Yahweh envisions. And so this idea of, well, how do you get there? You do what he said. See, Yahuwah has ideas not just for on the earth, but for eternity. And so what I heard as a Christian was that the reason why we exist on the face of the earth is to choose, do you want to go to heaven or hell? Do you want to be with God or apart from God for eternity? And some Christian faiths believe if you choose you don't want to be part of God, then you just are annihilated and cease to exist forever. Other Christian faiths believe, not so easy. You're going to be thrown into a lake of fire and be screaming in torment of pain for eternity. And there's been some people who had near-death experiences where they died and they're captured by demons and dragged off to some sort of hell, purgatory, whatever it is, and they're tortured. And I've read their stories where torture, like the bones broken and skin ripped off and screaming in pain, and somehow it goes back on and they get it ripped off again and it goes back on again. It's like, wait a minute, what's going on? Well, see, you got a body, but not like this body, and it keeps happening. And it's like, oh, come on now. When's enough enough? Well, it just ain't enough. There is no end. It's eternal torment. A neighbor was saying, well, if that's what hell is, I wouldn't want to go to heaven and be with a God who would invent such a place like that. He might as well throw me into hell too. And it's like, are you insane? What do you mean he might as well throw me in hell if that's the way he's going to make things, to throw the devil into a place like hell? You'd rather go there than be with a guy that would invent a place like that? If you knew the truth, because you want to be people of the God of truth, the Elohim who is truth, he is who he is. He's pure love. He's pure truth. He's pure chesed, tender loving kindness. And if he created a lake of fire to throw the devil, the angels, and a bunch of bad people, okay, but you say, well, I wouldn't want to be in eternity with him, with God like that. I better throw me in. It's like, well, I can't account for anybody else's rational illogic. The question is, I just want to have eternal life with that kind of God. No, I see. The question is, why are we here? If the bottom line is just accept Jesus in your heart, and whatever he makes it, he makes it. You just want to be here and not there. So just, is that really what Yahweh made this planet for? Well, what did he say? What he said to Israel, what I can read in the scripture, is that he says, I want you to believe, have faith, okay, but also love, also obey. And part of that is to have hope, have faith, to testify, and endure. And it's like, it's all that. It's not just believe so you can go to heaven. It's kind of like a lifestyle. It's a being, not just an end destination. So last week, actually back at the Gimel, I mentioned this song, Meet Me at Sukkot. I want to dance among the stars. And I gave explanation both at the Vav and the beginning of the Dalet. At the very end, just to readdress that, fly me to the seventh moon. What does that mean? Well, the seventh moon is the seventh month, and it's like, fly me. No, it's a play on words. Now, just listen, I'll just address this real quickly. Fly. Well, the pay is pronounced as a P or a PH, which is an F, pay, fay. What would be the word fly? Pay, lamed, yod, or flya. What's pay lamed? Well, it's the root of the word paleo, pay lamed aleph, or pay lamed vav, or pay lamed yod, pay lamed hey. That's all paleo, which means hidden, wonderful, marvelous, mysterious, something that's hidden. Nephalot, Psalm 119, verse 18, David was saying, unveil my eyes that I may see, perceive, understand your hidden mysteries. And that word, you put a nun in front of the Pele, the Nephalot, similar to Nephilim, the big things that have fallen. Okay, so the hidden things that were once there. Hey, that's like what Daniel was told to hide the words. That's paleo. If Daniel hid the paleo, meaning ancient letters, they've fallen, they've disappeared, they've become unknown. Unveil my eyes, David said. Well, that was 500 years before Daniel. So there's something that David was wanting to see while they were still written in Paleo that Daniel was told to hide and obscure into the modern, which at the time of the end should be remade. Mem Yod, flya me. Mem Yod means who or whoever. Two, Tav Vav. Tav is a mark or the sign or the to be known as. You're wearing a certain emblem. Oh, you must be one of them. You got Yahweh in your hat. You must be the guy that regards that ancient sacred name, right? Hamun, the moon, but it says the moon, but Mem Vav Nun means what is similar to the word Sefer. Mem Nun means to count or to number or that which is what's counted. So the word fakad or pekuf dalet, remember, David used it many times in Psalm 119. And he said, I'm responsible for what you gave me, you entrusted to me. And the word fakad means you were given something. Then when he comes back, he's going to say, what did you do with what I entrusted you with? What did you do? Just like the parable of the wealthy man who gave talents to his servants, and he gave 5 and 3 and 1. He took off and he come back and he said, what'd you do with it? That's exactly the meaning of Pekuf Dalet, which is exactly the meaning of Mem Nun or Mem Vav Nun or Mem Yod Nun. Count. You were given 10. What did you do with the 10? We thought number 4, the Sabbath day, didn't mean anything anymore, so we pitched that one out. And we thought your name didn't mean anything, so we pitched the first one out. But we got the other 8. Does that count? You're responsible for all 10. That's what he gave his people. Yeah, he gave them to the Israelites. We're Christians. We don't have to keep anything. That's what's being taught. Well, anyway, that's Hamuna. And then the word 7, Shin Bet Ayin, if you put a nun at the end, which is used in the book of Job, last chapter, it's there. It says Savannah, like Savannah, Georgia. So the word to swear a vow, or one who is keeping the vow as he was told, is the word Savannah, which is where we get the word 7. So flya me to Hamuna Savannah can be read as my wonderful, marvelous tefillah is also prayer. My prayer for the paleo, who am I? I want to be one of those whose heart, my heart is right there with the ancient, wonderful, marked, designated by the particular attribute to when the count is numbered, this is what's counted. I want to be one who acts according to their vow. And I did so. I satisfied the demand. I have fulfilled my purpose for being. I did what Yahweh asked me to do. I said what I said I was going to do. That's me. That's Israel. That's what this whole thing is all about. Flyamitu Hamuna Hasavana is kind of like answering the question, why are we even here? I could say the big quandary in life is, will somebody please tell me the truth? What is it? What is demanded of me? Why do I exist? Why? What is it to be alive and walk the face of the earth? Is there a purpose, a reason that each of us or any of us, why we are here? How do I accomplish the opportunity? If of all the people, of all the souls, the Alephs who could be here, I'm here at this juncture in time and space. If I don't know it and I just live my life and go on and maybe I didn't take advantage of it, how do I take advantage of the fact we're here? There was a guy who wrote a book believing that we were previously existing souls who said, can I have a shot at the walk in the face of the earth? Yeah, but you have to be completely ignorant of the fact you were ever in existence before. That's those guys. I want send me to the earth. I want to do. So we're all kind of like gimmeling voyagers to being born of a woman, dalliting through the pelvis door of the hay, the woman who would be the Ma Vav, who would go through the travails of grueling tortures, Zion, to get a shot at entering the Chet, the kingdom of heaven, number 8th letter in front of us. Is that why we're here? But if you read the alphabet, that's what it's basically saying. I've seen the bumper sticker way back when in the 70s. He who dies with the most toys wins, or he who dies having driven the most trucks wins, or monks who dies having forsaken the pleasures or the conveniences of the world wins, or whoever dies cruelly for the sake of noble cause wins, like Mother Teresa. Is like, is that really what's measured? If Elohim is going to hold us responsible and say, did you do it? There was one near-death experience person where they said that they got there, like, wow, there's heaven, about ready to go. And Yeshua said, hey, did you learn how to love? What? Did you learn how to love? I think so, but I'm here. Can I go in? Can now? Go back and learn how to love. Ah, come on, man. He was sent back to earth and he had to learn how to love before he had. We'll get there soon enough. But the question is, why are we here? To learn how to love? How do you store up treasures in heaven? Is there a system we could be working, operating in? One person said, there are no treasures in heaven. Well, Yeshua said we could store. The treasure is being in heaven. The treasure is standing in the presence of Elohim forever in his courtroom. That's good enough. It doesn't get any better than that. You don't have to worry about treasures. Is that true?
Eric,
Yes.
we're a little bit past the hour. It's okay. Like,
Okay, I'll take a
I'm just
break.
letting you know.
No, I see my screen. I didn't want to push any weird buttons, but I'll take a break.
I know. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. We'll take a break right now.
Okay.